All right, I'm admitting a couple more people and then we will get started here because it's 2 o'clock and I want to be very cognizant and aware of your time. So thanks for everyone showing up today. I'm so excited. I hope everyone's having a great spring so far. Sounds like it's still cold, but have faith it's going to get a little warmer here soon. So it's 2 o'clock. Welcome to So Many Needs, So Little Time. 5 effective strategies to ensure that all of your students are thriving and learning. Also, if you've never attended one of these office hours before, this is going to be a fast and furious interactive 30 minutes. So grab your smart devices. That way you will be able to scan QR codes to participate in the learning activities because we like to learn with and from each other. Also, I will be putting links in the chat box, so hopefully you found that. And we will be able to participate either QR codes, chat box, or links. So hopefully one of those ways you'll be able to participate today. All right, you ready? I'm very excited for today's topic. Okay, so I'm going to start off, scan the QR code using the camera on your phone, or I'm going to post a link in the chat box. And if you give me a hot minute, it's very hard for me to talk and post in the chat box. Not one of my top skills. All right, so in the chat box, there should be a link that you should be able to use. There is also the QR code, and you're going to answer, what does it mean to differentiate? So when it opens, you'll type your answer on Mentimeter and then click submit. We're going to use a strategy called a bell ringer. If you've never done a bell ringer before, it's a question or a statement or a picture or a link, something you're using at the beginning of class when students first walk in to get their brain shifting into your class, your subject, what you want them to be thinking about, and mentally prepare. If the code or link isn't working, please let me know in the chat box. Also, if you're more comfortable just typing in the chat box, please feel free to do that as well. If you've never used Mentimeter before, it's a great free interactive tool for educators that helps you focus on interactivity and collaboration. Make sure if you want to use it that you check with your IT department to make sure it's actually available for you and your students to use. All right, so we have a lot of responses so far. Differentiate to us means set apart, teach all students to their needs, be able to accept all opinions and all differences, choose between things, deliver different lessons and subjects at different levels. These are all phenomenal, guys, by the way. Varied ways to reach your students, teach different needs, separate 2 different topics or a particular issue, change the assignment in some way. So if you're noticing, there's a lot of really similar things that are amazing, and we're kind of finding some similarities in what it means to each of us to differentiate. And there's also a lot of different ways that we view differentiation. So differentiate officially is to modify your instruction to meet individual needs and to accommodate diverse learning styles and abilities to make sure that all of your students can succeed. Now, some of these needs are apparent, such as students with visual impairments, hearing impairments, or physical impairments, while sometimes they may be less apparent, and you may need to provide choice boards or varying books for varying interests, or give instructions in a variety of ways, allow students who already mastered the materials extensions or mini lessons, or students who are still struggling those mini lessons and extensions as well. And then I'm going to do a really brief overview here. So if you have students with 504s, which are your medical needs-based learning plans, or IEPs, which are individual education plans, they'll probably have some different differentiation strategies in those documents that you're legally required to meet. However, the bonus side of that is you're probably amazing people and awesome, and you're already doing that anyways for all of your students. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it varies so much by state, by school district. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on that, but it is a good thing to get thinking about and to be aware of. You can also use any of those strategies listed in those documents for any of your students to differentiate. So now that we have some background information on what differentiation is, so that we have some idea where we're going today, my name is Meredith Llewellyn. I'm the Instructional Design Specialist for Goodheart-Willcox Publisher. Just for some background information for you guys, I've been a classroom teacher. I've been a technology trainer and LMS trainer. I've done PD presentations on effective pedagogy, and now I'm an instructional design specialist. So it's been an exciting ride. So thanks for joining me today. And we're going to start with our learning outcomes and our goals for this session. It's super important for our learners and our engagement for people to know what they're learning, what the goal is for the day. So our learning outcomes for today are, you'll know why differentiation is important. Why are we even talking about this? Why do so many school districts care? We'll talk about 4 ways you can differentiate and explore 5 strategies that will help you seamlessly develop or implement this into your current teaching practice so that tomorrow or right after this webinar, you could go implement these and put them in your toolbox for teaching. So I don't know about all of you, but one of the hardest things when I taught was differentiating. There are so many needs and so little time. I taught about 175 students a day in the St. Louis area, and differentiating for all of those needs took up a lot of my time, which somehow always seemed to be short on, no matter how organized or prepared I was. So our focus today is going to be on giving you strategies that you can use to differentiate without taking up a lot of that precious time that I know you guys don't have a lot of. All right. So as people, we know no 2 people are alike. And as educators, we're well aware that no 2 students are the same and no 2 students learn the same. Yeah, some of them learn similarly, but there's so many factors that make us who we are, that our learning styles and abilities and preferences are so different. So as educators, embracing this difference can make our lives so much easier and also help our students to really learn that material and understand it deeply and meaningfully. So you can differentiate in 4 different categories. Our first category is content. So you can differentiate your content. And to do this, you're going to assess your students' prior knowledge or their skills in a topic and then differentiate from there. You're basically meeting them where they're at when they start that topic in your class. You can also differentiate the process, and this is done by learning how students prefer to learn and how much support they need. So basically, you're changing how they engage and interact with their content. You can also differentiate the product by allowing students to demonstrate mastery in a variety of ways. And I know that sounds scary, but we'll talk about it in a second. And lastly, you can differentiate your learning environment itself. Now, that one can be a little tricky, especially if you're in shop classes or FACS classes, because there's not always a lot of ways to differentiate that learning environment, but it is a possibility. So scan the QR code using the camera on your phone, or there's a link that I'm going to post in the chat box. And remember, this is not my strength to talk and do this at the same time. So it'll be there in a second. Okay, and this will take you to a tool called Padlet. This Padlet is going to list 4 categories that we just talked about. And under the categories, you're going to list different strategies you currently use for each of these. So remember, content is you knowing their prior knowledge and meeting them there. Process is engaging them in different ways. Product is how they show they understand. And then the learning environment is your classroom setup. So how do you already utilize this in your classroom? And if it's not working, don't panic. We'll just use the chat box. It's totally fine. So you can access your chat box, and there should be a link to Padlet in there, or you can access the QR code. And if neither of those are working, or you simply don't want to use a link or a chat QR code today, put it in the chat box, and that's totally fine. To use Padlet, it's very similar to Mentimeter. You click the plus sign, and then it'll either say publish or submit, depending on if you're on your cellular device or mobile device or a computer. So what are some strategies you already use in your classroom to differentiate? All right, so under content, we have a lot of submissions. There's differentiate activities, content for students, colors, notes, activities, review prior course grades and ask what they know from the previous course. That's a great idea, especially if you're teaching those advanced classes. Videos with captions and slow down. Perfect. The slowing down is awesome. Make sure I know what each student's ability and design the structure around that, different activities for content, know where each student is and relate the content, graphic organizers, hands-on skills and group learning. You guys are like experts already. Measure student process, models. After knowing where everyone's at, basics for everybody, let them ask questions before you teach the topic. I super appreciate that one as a former science teacher. It really eliminates the misconceptions. Under process, we have, I use with my students with the activities and videos for visual representation. So important, especially in a lot of our CTE classes, that visual representation. Paper handouts, PDFs. Under product, skills check, learning environment, go outside and color. Oh my gosh, yes, getting kids outside. I don't know after they've been locked up all winter if you know how excited they get when they get to go outside. It's a big day. Options for creative, authentic assessments, scaffolded assignments. These are absolutely 100% perfect, on point, wonderful. So the first strategy we're going to talk about, because I told you I would teach you 5, is called a jigsaw. So this strategy is typically used for reading, but you can use it for a whole lot of different things. Anything you can break up, you can use the jigsaw for. So I've done this for research projects. I've done this for longer directions. I used to teach science, so we did some of those longer procedures. We would break those down into a jigsaw method. Students are assigned a number or a letter or a color, a shape, a bird group, whatever you wanted to pick them at to get them into different groups. And then if you're doing a reading, for older students, you typically assign them 1 paragraph to a chapter, depending on what you're reading. Younger kids, it might be a sentence, a line, something to that effect. And then they're given time to read. And once they've had their time to read and kind of process a little bit, then you'll mix them up so that one person from each group is in a new group. So there's a visual on here because this kind of cannot make a lot of sense. So for our jigsaw, they chose A for this picture and B and C and D. So you can assign A, B, C, and D, have them read. Then when they're done, you mix them up so that there's 1 letter per group. And then they share that. So each person in that new group is an expert. And that way your students don't have to read the whole thing because that can really bog some of our students down. And instead, they know all the information. They're now experts. You can differentiate this differentiation style in a couple different ways. So you can have them start by meeting in a group of their own. So all the A's together, all the B's together and talk and then break them out. You can also have graphic organizers provided for them so they fill it out. Or if you have students who aren't doing well with writing, it's a class that doesn't do well with that, you can just have listening or recording or speech to text. So there's a whole ways that you can differentiate this differentiation strategy. So this one's called Jigsaw. And to kind of give you an idea of what I was talking about by breaking up reading, this is one that I did for a project-based learning book study. So I broke it down into different paragraphs. So we had 6 groups. Group 1 read this paragraph, 2, then 3, and it continued on. And then we would talk about those couple of pages. Our second strategy is called a think, pair, share. You've probably seen this before or heard of it. If you've done a Kagan group, it's very big in Kagan. This strategy is typically done to help students brainstorm or reflect. So it's going to activate prior knowledge and help your students with collaboration and discussion. So sometimes you tell your students we're going to discuss and then they sit there silently, or they don't know what to say, or they start acting out. This way helps them get those thoughts in order before they have to share to the whole class. So to begin, you give them your thing you want them to reflect on, whether that's a sentence statement, a picture, a title for your next unit, a video link, a sound, a tool, whatever you guys are using that you want them to think about. Then they talk with a partner, so that's the pair. So that is typically either your shoulder partner, someone you're sitting next to, or a face partner, someone who's across from you. Then they'll talk with a larger group and a larger group until finally you guys are having a whole class discussion. So once again, you can differentiate this differentiation strategy by providing graphic organizers. And you can do a quick search on the internet. There's tons of free graphic organizers for Think, Pair, Share specifically. Or if you have another class that doesn't do well with writing, they can draw pictures. They can do a speech to text, or they can just not write at all and just have an actual discussion as a class. Okay, this is what I told you not to panic about when I told you that you can change the product and how students demonstrate their mastery. So this is an option called a choice board. So these will take a little more work up front, but once they're in place, they're really amazing and really cool to use. So choice boards allow students to choose how they practice or how they demonstrate mastery. You as the teacher, you're the expert, you'll decide what the students need to demonstrate that they know or what they're going to learn based on those learning outcomes you have in place already. Then you'll decide what activities are appropriate, and then make sure you provide a diverse array of choices. And they may be ones you wouldn't pick. Like I had rap on one of them and I would never rap, but some of my kids did amazing work with that. This falls under project-based learning. So if that's something your school is pushing right now or really into, this falls under that category. Choice boards are really important because they increase student engagement by providing them with interests and preferences. There's typically 3 ways that you can use this. The most common is an end of unit assessment. Another way is to give it at the beginning of the unit and say, hey, by the end of the unit, you need to complete 5 of these. You pick which 5. Or you can do it in a day and say, by the end of today, you need to do a tic-tac-toe board, give me 3 in a row, okay? A choice board template could look like this. You could write a short story, you could have them create a slideshow, make a graph, make a chart, make a poster, make a flow chart, make food, make a song, write an essay, make a book. You could do a whole slew. Some people have even done write plays, make a video. And then grading choice boards can be very daunting for some people and very scary, but don't panic. They're actually pretty easy to grade because you create one rubric for all of them, and that will allow you the consistent grading. So all students, despite doing different projects, you want them to have the same outcomes, right? Same knowledge, same mastery. So that's what you're going to grade them on. Make sure you share them up front with your students so that they can follow that as they go through to make sure they get all the points they need. Okay, I've talked at you a lot, I know. So now we're going to have an opportunity. Scan the QR code using the camera on your phone, or I'm going to put a link in the chat box. And you're going to say how you could use, what categories you could put in a choice board in your classroom. Sorry, I told you I'm really bad at putting things in the chat box and talking at the same time. So this is another Mentimeter activity. So what activities could you use in a choice board in your subject? And some of these, like, you may think I would never do that, but then some of your kids are gonna like wow your socks off. So what activities could you use in a choice board? And remember, if the link's not working or you're just more comfortable putting it in the chat box, join in with the chat box. That would be totally acceptable. So we have a storyboard. That's fantastic. By the way, I forgot to tell you, this is a word cloud strategy. So it's going to, when more of the words pop up, the words will get bigger. And as it's less common, the words will get smaller and it'll make just this really random picture. So what activities could you put in a choice board? So we have return demo, poems, storyboarding, flow charts, raps. I think I said infographics. I think I said video. These are all fantastic ideas. And you can even do this with your students. So there have been times where I'm really struggling with coming up with an idea. You can ask your students. You can give them note cards or sticky notes or set up a Mentimeter word cloud and say, what would you guys like to do? What do you want to show me how you know things? And you're going to get some pretty awesome surprises. Recipes, create a PowerPoint, economic impact charts, codes, types of businesses, YouTubes, Q&A. These are fantastic. So if you're struggling with coming up with ideas, your peers have just provided you with some really awesome ideas. And this is why we like to learn so much with and from each other. So we have wiring diagrams, write a play about soldering a pipe. That is so cool. That might be the coolest one I've heard. All right. Our fourth strategy is stations. So stations are a really great way to engage your students. You get them up and moving. You may also let them socialize, which is up to you. That's how your class flows. You can decide if your students work alone, if they work in groups. You can decide if they move together or move separately. Your stations could involve technology or equipment that you use, pencil and paper, or all of the above. Stations can be completed very easily. So let me tell you, there are some days where I have walked into a class and been like, oh my goodness, this is not going to go well today. They need something to do. So in those cases, I've taken my worksheet and I've said, all right, we're going to move around the room. At this place, you're filling out questions 1 through 3, this one 4 through 6, that one 5 through 7, or however numbers work. Then I've also had days where I've just printed off the notes for that day in a PowerPoint and I've put them at different stations and I've said, all right, we're going to move around the room to take our notes, and they move around the room to take their notes. You can have task cards. You can use it to research different parts of a project. I've seen English teachers who've done it to write parts of a paper. So this station is your introduction, this part is your thesis, this part is your conclusion. There's a whole lot of ways to do stations. Then you can have a computer at the station. So if you want them to watch supplemental videos or you need them to hear a sound, you can also do that. Lastly, some pro tips here on mistakes that I have made that hopefully will help you guys not make the same mistakes. Make sure that you are setting expectations and guidelines for your students. Younger students will take more practice. And make sure you set a reasonable amount of time, that Goldilocks time frame where it's not too long and not too short, and set a visible timer so your students know how much time they have left. This will alleviate a lot of frustration and anxiety on both ends. And when they're rotating, you can put up another timer, or you can play music and say you have until the music stops to clean up and switch stations. That's worked wonders for my students. If you're going to have students move as a group, you may want to have something there that they can do if they have an extension project or if they get bored, because we all know when they get bored, that's when the misbehaviors happen. And lastly, we have flexible grouping. So this strategy is a way of placing students together based on their needs, abilities, or interests. Now, word of caution, be aware of your institution's policies or opinions of ability grouping, because not every district is super okay with ability grouping. So needs and interest grouping is usually fine, rarely causes issues, but occasionally that ability grouping will send up some red flags. So one key to flexible grouping is that it changes fairly often. And for our CTE teachers, this is a phenomenal strategy for you guys to use. Usually you'll see people change their flexible seating or grouping by topic or unit, but you could also change it daily, weekly, monthly, multiple times a day, by project. You can do it however you want to. So you can choose to have students grouped similarly, for example, similar abilities, similar needs, similar interests, Or you can place them in different abilities, different needs, and different interests based on what you need and what you feel comfortable with as the expert. If students are grouped by abilities and needs, that allows you to work with your lower levels and provide extensions to your higher levels and let them work a little bit more independently. You can also use this when you want students to work on communication or soft skills and social emotional skills. This gives them the opportunity to work with each other. And it also helps create better understanding of the content because they're working with people, and that usually generates better understanding. You can put students into groups in a variety of ways. So you can give a pretest or a survey about interests and group them based on that. You can have them line up by height, by age, by birthday, and then divide them up. You can have them go to 4 corners of the room and say, line up by this corner's the seasons, or you could line up by types of food or music. Really, the sky's the limit here. In the groups, you could assign jobs for each of them. So I've done roles. So this person is the turning in paper person. This person's the getting paper person. This person is the materials person. And you can assign jobs that way. Also note that just because you put students in group, you don't have to leave them there. If it's not working, you're the expert, move them. All right. So we're at our ending here, and I want to be really cognizant of your time. So which strategy of these 5 would you be most likely to use? So if you scan the QR code, or I'm going to put a link in the chat box, it will take you to Mentimeter, where you are going to rank your strategies that you are most likely to use. So out of the strategies we talked about, just for my understanding to assess myself, a little formative assessment here, which strategy are you most likely to use out of all of these? So it looks like first is stations, second choice boards, and they're switching around because this is live. So what you're seeing, jigsaws at the bottom, flexible grouping, think, pair, share, choice boards. Thank you, Terry. Yes, like Terry did, feel free to use the chat box too. I understand some of you may not have your phones and you're using your computer or you're distracting a kid with the phone, so use the chat box. All right, so it looks like stations and choice boards are like really close hand in hand there. Perfect. Okay. So our last strategy we're going to do today is an exit strategy to help us reflect on how we can utilize this in our own teaching. So this strategy is called "This will be successful if." And you can use this strategy in your classrooms to help kids reflect. It generally works better with our older students than our younger students because it does take a fair amount of reflection and cognitive ability to use the strategy. But this will be successful if, and I'm going to put a link in the chat box. I love using jigsaw method with graduate students in blended learning environments. 100% graduate students love it. It takes their reading level that they have to do that day down a little bit. Choice boards. All right, so in the chat box, there's a link, or you can use the QR code. This strategy, or this will be successful if. How could you use this in your room tomorrow, with your class tomorrow, today? If you have a 5:30 class, what could you use one of these strategies for? All right. So use the right way with technical students. Yep, this will be successful if you use it the right way. Yes, I like that answer. Get the students to interact, get deeper into the content. If I understand my students and their needs, that's the key there, isn't it? It's sometimes really hard. They're not always very open. The content is understood and practiced, set up my stations to get students more involved, completing multiple labs as stations. As a former science teacher, those labs as stations, life changer. If the teacher brings energy and positivity, yeah, and some days you got to dig real deep for that. Encourage working together, 100%. Stations will be successful if we are to work on different types of problems. Exactly. Okay, so being aware of your time, we're going to recap real quick. I know it's time flies when you're having fun. These go just so fast for me. So today we learned why is differentiation important, 4 ways that we could differentiate content, process, product, and learning environment, 5 strategies, and we talked about how we could utilize it in our own practice ASAP. We used Mentimeter and Padlet, and we used the strategies Bell Ringer, a strategy list, word clouds, and this will be successful if, and a ranking, which isn't really a strategy, but kind of is. So reminders, if you could please take a second and fill out this PD evaluation form. I'm going to put a link in the chat box, or you can scan the QR code. This is a quick 6-question evaluation of this webinar of me, how I did today. At GW, we really use this feedback. I read through all of them. I take your advice, and I use it to make things better. Sometimes people will give suggestions on webinars. For example, the differentiation one now was the suggestion we got, and a lot of people really wanted it. So if you're wanting something, ask for it. We do read through these. Also, the certificate of attendance is at the top, but if you joined later, you might not see it. So here is the certificate again for attendance in the chat box. If you're having difficulties with this, please email one of us at GW in the Instructional Designer PD department, and we'll make sure that you get this. And lastly, within 24 hours of this, you'll be receiving a recording of the webinar to the email that you registered with. And next week, we have our Ask the ATIS experts. And if you didn't get a chance to do your PD, there's a QR code on this again for professional development evaluation. Also, if you're interested in next week's webinar, there is the QR code to register for it by the red arrow. And I'm going to put a link in the chat box. But if you're not sure if you can attend or it's not your thing, but then you decide it is, you can also register with our PD email that will go out in a little bit. So thank you again for joining me today and for letting me learn with and from you guys. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask or reach out. My name is Meredith Llewellyn. I'm the Instructional Design Specialist here at Goodheart-Willcox Publisher. I hope your week goes great, your springs warm up a little bit, your allergies don't get crazy if you're my pollen peeps, and I look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Have a great day. So great to meet with you guys. Thank you so much for participating, and I hope you learned a lot, and I will see you all later.